Welcome to Algebra 1, Unit 7, Lesson 23, Practice Problems. In this lesson, we have three vocabulary terms to look at first. The first vocabulary term is maximum. A maximum of a function is a value of the function that is greater than or equal to all other values. The maximum of the graph of the function is the corresponding highest point on the graph. The second vocabulary term is minimum. A minimum is a function, or a minimum of a function is a value of the function that is less than or equal to all the other values. The minimum of the graph of the function is the corresponding lowest point on the graph. And our third vocabulary term for this lesson is vertex form of a quadratic expression. The vertex form of a quadratic expression in x is a times x minus h squared plus k, where a, h, and k are constants, and a is not 0. If you have any questions about the vocabulary terms, please ask for clarification now before we begin the practice problems. Our first practice problem says here is a graph of a quadratic function, f of x. What is the minimum value of f of x? So first, we need to remember that the value of a function is referring to the y value. So, if we want the minimum value of f of x, we want the lowest y value on the graph, and that would be right here at our x-intercept, where x is negative 10 and y is 0. So the minimum value of f of x is 0, because y equals 0 at the lowest point. If you have any questions about how to identify the minimum value of a graph, please ask for clarification now before we move on to the other practice problems. Our second practice problem says the graph that represents f of x equals x plus 1 squared minus 4 has its vertex at -1, -4. Explain how we can tell from the expression x plus 1 squared minus 4 that -4 is the minimum value of f rather than the maximum value. So if you remember, the vertex form is a times x minus h squared plus k. In this form, if a is positive, the graph opens up, and the vertex is the minimum. So here we don't see an A, so A is understood to be 1. 1 is positive, so this graph opens upward and the vertex is the minimum. If we had a negative A, then the graph would open downward and the vertex would be the maximum. If you have any questions about how to use the vertex form to determine whether the graph opens upward or downward, and whether the vertex is the minimum or the maximum, please ask for clarification now before we begin the last practice problem. Our last practice problem says each expression here defines a quadratic function. Find the vertex of the graph of the function, then state whether the vertex corresponds to the maximum or the minimum value of the function. So, vertex form a times x minus h squared plus k. Vertex is h k if a is positive, vertex is minimum. If a is negative, vertex is maximum. So now let's look at each of these. Number 1, our vertex is positive 5 because it's the opposite of what's inside the parentheses, and it's positive 6 because it's exactly what's outside the parentheses. And because A is positive, this is the minimum. And the graph opens upward. Number 2, the vertex is at negative 5, negative 1. And because A is positive, this is the minimum. The graph opens upward from here. Number 3, the vertex is at -3, -10. And because A is negative, this is the maximum. The parabola opens downward from here. Number 4. The vertex is at +7, +11, and because A is positive, this is the minimum, and the parabola opens upward from here. Number 5. The vertex is at +2, -2, and because A is negative, this is a maximum, and the graph opens downward from here. And finally, number 6, the vertex is at -1, 0, and because A is positive, this is the minimum, and the parabola opens upward from the vertex. If you have any questions about how to identify the vertex from the vertex form, or if you have any questions about how to determine whether the vertex is the minimum with the parabola opening up or the maximum with the parabola opening down, please ask for clarification now so that you will be better prepared as we head into our last lesson, lesson 24.